All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a nice little break, and we're now ready to start our second panel. If I can ask everyone to please introduce themselves. Laura?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Laura Menken. I am an SVP at PNC Bank. I am the head of digital payments and our mobile app.
Alex Johnson. I am the creator and author of a newsletter called Fintech Takes.
John Huntinghouse, and I am the VP of Marketing at Bank, which is a digital online bank based out in Utah.
Yeah, my name is Omar Hamdan. I lead digital innovation at Vault.Bank.
Hi, I'm Sarah DiCara. I lead organic audience acquisition at Gen Digital, and I'm here representing GOBankingRates and Moneyline.com.
Oh, and our panel, is beyond the AI checkbox, turning AI into a practical engine for acquisition and engagement. If I could start off with a very high-level question, like, I'll ask you all to go down the line, but what is AI from your perspective, and how does it fit into financial services? Sarah, maybe you'll start with you.
What is AI from my perspective? I mean, AI touches everything. In terms of, in my opinion, one of the marquee ways it fits in financial services, the panel before was talking a little bit about it, but I think a lot about how AI supports human intervention and where human intervention is still needed. It's not everywhere, but it's in some key places, and for me, that's very, very top of mind.
Yeah. For me at Vault, really reducing the irritation that our customers experience, and really getting that proactive approach instead of reactive, and utilizing it that way. So.
Yeah, I view AI as a very powerful tool, but still a tool that allows us to really focus on solving the core problems that we're running into the bank. And specifically when it comes to LLMs, these large language models, is how do we do this at scale and how do we do it at speed? And I think it does it really well. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think when we're thinking about like what is AI, like in my mind, it's how do we, it's a tool that allows us to still solve age-old problems that we've had for decades.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is that what is AI in a financial services context? Well, it's not new, right? We know that. Even though the tool has changed and we have different models and they work in some kind of fundamentally different and important ways, we also have been using AI in financial services for a long time, and we have a lot of established frameworks that I think at least are a starting place for thinking about how to apply LLMs, which again are pretty distinctly different in financial services. So it's a good starting place.
Yeah.
And I would just add that AI is really changing everything from marketing through engagement through attention. It's transforming how we market and acquire customers, how we deploy campaigns, how we provide personalized, tailored, real-time experiences leveraging virtual assistants to our customers that can do everything for you. We use it for everything from KYC to fraud. Now we're using it for the call center. So it's really, to going off of your point, it's really a powerhouse tool that we're leveraging across the entire financial services ecosystem.
And to maybe dive down a little bit into that, how has AI changed how consumers consume AI and information, and then the waterfall of that is like, how does that change how you market to them?
Sure. So I would say that LLMs are now the new Google search, and so from a marketing perspective, they're having to rethink both the type of content and the structure of the content, knowing that this is how customers are not only finding products, but it's how they're shopping, right? It's transforming. Agentic commerce is now, really top of mind for banks. We've seen in the industry a 10% conversion increase because people are going to these agents to find the right product, and there's that level of trust and intent that's already there. They never have to go to a bank's website to shop for a product. They're engaging solely with these agents.
John or Omar, you want to Would you have a similar assessment that these LLMs are the new Google, or?
Yeah, for sure. And we talk a lot about AI being like possibly hallucinating, and it may not have that trust. But so did Google. Google had all the same issues, and it's not that when you would search something on Google that it would be 100% accurate. It was more what was best optimized and what had the best SEO play. But one of the things that we see, especially at Tab, we're a much smaller bank, but it allows us to outpunch, our weight class, because when we have a legitimately strong product that can be validated by third-party sources, it brings our credibility up. Whereas in the past, we would oftentimes have to try to convince and spend a ton of money that we didn't really have to try to compete with larger banks. But when we have like our consumer checking with Tab Spend, it's a legitimately strong product in the marketplace, and so it brings that credibility and that trust that people already have. And so, yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add on to that, speaking from my perspective, is that I'm operating Vault with 2 people because of the tool that we have, and with our bots and our AI really focusing in and focusing on the problem that the clients have, really helping us figure out and just do more important things, and then have them really get the answers on their own, and us, adding on to it if we needed. But we're running Vault with 2 people right now, so. Yeah.
And as from your institutional perspective, like, looking at these LLMs, like, has it changed how you might want to invest in certain marketing activities?
Yeah, absolutely. It really broadens up the discussion on what's working and what's not, and really saving us being a smaller bank where we should invest that dollar. So yes, absolutely.
And John, you mentioned hallucinations. Like, is that a big problem, or like, is that what do you think?
Like, it's a problem, but I don't think it's something that we are just working within the space that we're trying to look through. And when there are things that need to be corrected or that we're trying to put out in the marketplace, we spend a lot of time in third-party validations, right? Because we know from our data that almost half of our visibility that comes from AI comes from NerdWallet, right?
Yeah.
So very specific to one publisher that's bringing a lot of visibility into the bank. And so in those core areas, it's like, okay, we know that this has to be 100% true, and obviously NerdWallet does a really great job. But when we're looking at the data, it's similar to SEO. Like, whenever you have third-party publishers and websites talking about the brand, it's just making sure that's correct. And but to that tune, we're not really seeing anything, fundamentally something that would be disastrous to the bank, because for the most part, these LLMs are doing really well, especially as they're incorporating a lot more of these third-party research tools.
Alex, from your perspective, like with the different tools and platforms that are out there, how should institutions assess them, and how might things like hallucinations and error rates and things like that fall into this evaluation process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is that every tool is going to work a little different for different institutions, right? And so depending on your goals, depending on the data that you have access to, depending on the data you're willing to give access to, I think all of those things determine which model might be the best fit. And then the other thing just to keep in mind is that unlike traditional sort of vendor evaluations where it's like, we're going to be an FIS shop and we've made that decision for our descendants for 150 years, that's not the case with AI, right? Every 6 weeks, there's a new model, there's a new tool, there's a new re-ranking of the performance of LLMs. And so the decision-making process has to be much more iterative. And I think I'd be curious for the rest of the panel's perspective on this, but I think one of the things that does is require you to think a little bit different design-wise, because you can't necessarily tie yourself to any one system. You have to be sort of agile, and that's very different than I think a lot of financial institutions think, which is more, we're going to be a FIS shop or a Fiserv shop or Jack Henry. That's a different mindset in the world of AI.
Well, banks are like highly regulated, which means that as a vendor, as a fintech, or any vendor, the process to be onboarded could take 6 months to a year and a half. Now, if you're an AI vendor, it's a whole nother level of scrutiny, right? So, you know, there's governance boards, there's lawyers that are basically saying, you know, you are personally liable, your vendor is liable if your agent does anything to our code base, impacts our customers. So there's trade-offs with, do I partner with multiple vendors, or do I just handcuff myself to a single vendor knowing that, you know, I can just work with them and I don't have to worry about multiple vendors, you know, impacting my customers and their experience?
I spent 9 years at Citi, and when I was looking at partnerships with smaller companies, or any company for that matter, time and time again, companies would say, we're sharing this information with you that we only share with our VCs or our investors, and that to me was like, I mean, it can be very prohibitive in terms of who you work with, but it can also maybe give you a better feeling when you jump into partnership with someone. Like how you're at a large institution, like how are you managing that?
That's a great question. So we have a lot vendors that we've been working with for years. We're working with one vendor right now to actually rebuild our entire mobile app using agentic AI. We've had other vendors that have approached us to do the same thing, but since we've had 10 plus years with this vendor, we're willing to embark on this AI journey for software development with them. We also look to other financial institutions and say, what vendors do they work with? It's easier for us to work with existing vendors than it is any new vendor. And it's interesting because there's so many vendors out there deploying different solutions across, like I mentioned, the financial services ecosystem, and we are just dipping our toe in the water.
And I'm sure that even dipping that toe can be a very painful dip of the toe.
Yes, I mean, our CEO has come out and said he's spending, $3.8 billion in agentic in AI this year. So we're looking at how do we deploy solutions across, everything from marketing to the call center to fraud services. But there's a whole level of scrutiny that goes into onboarding, like I said, and partnering with a new vendor in the space.
Yeah, speaking on a $300 million bank and asset size, the vetting of your vendors is very important because they are coming in as a partner and they are reflecting your brand, and just the vetting piece and finding the right partner that fits for you is very important because yes, they are held, reliable if there's any data leakage or, any valuable information getting sent out there, and we are heavily regulated, so they, the checkpoints have to really align, but the vetting process, and she plugged for Fintech Meetup, but this is why this is so important here, because you could really face-to-face and ask those hard questions without that pressure by getting that right partner to help you grow. So,
And Sarah, in terms of how institutions might be using AI for acquisitions, like have you been seeing any trends or any?
Yeah, I would say that the trend that's kind of hot in the street right now is how aggressively everybody has dove deeply into LLMs as an acquisition source, but the volume's still not fully there. And so how do you toe the line of still supporting some of these maybe perceived legacy channels like SEO, which have a lot of the same fundamental needs as what it takes to win in an LLM space, but not shifting too far away that you're going to run away from where the volume still is. Now, that's going to change very quickly, but I would say that I think that those shops that are going to be set up to succeed are going to be those that really take a beat to think about what are the best practices in both of those worlds, and that's where I'm going to make my bets, so that as everything around us is still changing and shifting, and an agent can do this, and now it can do this, and now it can do these 5 things, there's still some of the same core fundamentals that you need in order to succeed in all the above. And yeah, those that invest in those and call those out will be the ones that succeed in the long run, in my opinion.
And how about in terms of AI and lifecycle marketing, or or even building engagement? Like, have you seen any trends around that?
Well, I think that there's some channels that were already set up for quick iterative testing that AI is going to aid, particularly around like CRM, I think was mentioned in the previous panel. I think that's an obvious one. Some of the stuff that I get more excited about is around how you can use AI to transform your content into different formats. I still feel deeply, as I said at the beginning, that there is a place for human expertise in the content creation process. It's probably a tight team of really good people that are certified in their space and know what they're talking about. So how can you take what they're providing in terms of their expertise? And at our team at Moneyline, we built a tool internally that you can take any piece of structured content that we create, put it into a system, and within 10 minutes you have a compliant, high-quality piece of video content that I can then syndicate out to YouTube, to all of my video syndication partners, to extend the reach of what this tight-knit group of people are doing. And so that's just one example. I think there's going to be a lot more to come, but just the, how you use it as a multiplier, force multiplier for the work that humans are still doing will be very interesting.
Another big trend that we're seeing at large FIs is, from an engagement perspective, is really powering the virtual assistants that already exist, right? Capital One has NO, Bank of America has Erica. So really powering those with AI to provide that personalized, tailored experience. The goal is to make the bank essentially invisible, right? So changing the entire interface to be personalized for you. We're already seeing it from an onboarding, a sign-up perspective, right? Where I would like to see a fintech that is able to power an LLM with an agent that takes the prospective client all the way from their initial .com page, all the way through sign-up, onboarding into the product experience, and actually helps them make investments or fund their account. That has yet to exist.
Alex, have you seen any interesting fintechs that are doing something like that? Or?
Well, it's hard to tell because all the new companies say they're doing interesting AI things. But going back to the point about vetting out who's doing what, it's really difficult, I think, to tell. We were talking about this backstage. I mean, one of the things that I think is more of a tell is when the founding team is really impressive and knows a corner of these processes or workflows just extremely well. Because the shorthand I use mentally when I think about sort of the application of AI in these areas is, okay, we're going to throw 1,000 interns at this problem. And interns are great. They're enthusiastic. You can coach them. They'll take feedback. They're sort of flexibly creative and clever. They're generalists, they can solve problems, but they're also morons and they screw stuff up all the time, and we can't trust them to just go off and do work unsupervised. And critically, they need context. They need to really deeply understand a problem area. And so the fintech companies that I'm getting excited about are the ones that are diving deep into a really narrow slice of infrastructure, but going really deep, using the human knowledge that they've gained over decades of how that one corner of the market works, and then adding that piece to the stack. And if you think about fintech companies from a value perspective, it's much better to build something deep and narrow on top of an LLM, because the LLM you don't control, right? None of the companies in this industry are going to build our own LLMs. That's a game for others to play. So you're already not totally in control of your unit economics. You're not totally in control of your base infrastructure. So you don't want to be a thin layer across a whole bunch of different jobs. That doesn't add any value. You want to be extremely deep in a narrow slice and really layer on top of that LLM, and that's what I'm seeing.
And what we were talking about was actually specifically around agentic commerce, right? Where we're still both from the issuer side and largely from the networks trying to understand liability. And they're still, defining protocols, writing the rule book essentially But we are seeing, fintechs come up that are like, I can help you with it, whether it be virtual cards, I can provide, that assurance that it was the customer, not the agent, initiating that transaction. Because, the agents are the new Google search. We're seeing that transform commerce as well.
No, it's a sensitive subject because of the regulations that are out there. And with, for instance, the KYC, we have a great fintech partner that helps us with that. But it doesn't do everything. And there is still questions that do come across with our regulators when we get audited every year, that the questions come up and they get scared because it's still new. So there's still challenges, and I do see it improving the more normal the conversation gets. But the fintech, fine, but if you're a bank in the fintech space, it's going to be more challenging to really incorporate and go full into the AI without coming across those issues that I've been coming across, especially with our annual review. So.
Yeah, and to Alex's point, I think that's why, the vetting process is so, literally every person that has to deal with vendors, especially in this space, you go through that honeymoon phase, great, promise of the things that they're going to be able to do, and then you actually get into the meat and potatoes of it, and then it just falls apart, or things pop up, and there's a bazillion things that kind of throws a wrench into the whole process. And so I think, there is a lot of, when we're trying to think of, hey, we need someone that knows the meat and the potatoes, because we know that we're going to run into stuff that we just don't know, right? Like, what are the things that we don't know? And as we run into those things, we need that expertise, that, that experience to help us work through the problems that we don't know what the problems are yet, but we just know that we are going to run into them. And I think we could have a whole panel on horror stories, right? Of war stories of these partnerships that have gone bad, right? And they've blown up in our face. And so, yeah, I think that vetting process and really understanding, like, does this team really have that deep expertise to help us, run through those problems when we face them.
Well, to build on that point for just like a quick sec, I think what you're describing is almost this idea that in the age of AI, every company that you're going to work with is a startup, right? Regardless of the size of the company, because this is so new and no one knows all the answers. And so you're really much like investors in early stage companies, you're betting more on the team to figure it out than you are they have everything nailed day one. And I think that applies to large vendors who are adapting their products or systems to AI. And I think it applies to new startups that you just encounter. If they have a really impressive team and you want to bet on that team, that's probably a smarter way to think about it than, oh, these guys have a track record for the last 75 years. Well, for most of that time, AI wasn't around in the format that we're talking about, so it's not that useful.
And sort of to double down, and maybe drill down on that one, like, in terms of the teams that you'd need, let's say, thinking about like a chatbot type of a company versus, an agentic type of a partner, like how different would the teams need to be for between those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge difference between, as many folks have already mentioned on this panel and the previous panel, there's a huge difference between chatbots and agentic systems, right? A chatbot is relatively self-contained, and you can wrap it, you can give it instructions, you can sort of tweak it around the edges, but the modality is the same, and the limits to what jobs it can do are relatively constrained. By contrast, like when we say agentic AI, what we really mean is an LLM given tools and an environment and memory to go solve problems and to be more autonomous. And so I think you need to evaluate those two different types of solutions, and the teams building them very differently. And going back to the point about compliance, like if you're building an agentic system that can take some type of autonomous action, that's the area where regulators are going to be really freaked out just as a default state. And so you want to have a team building those that has been there before, that can anticipate where regulators are going to be concerned, can build the appropriate guardrails, and just think about the problems around the corner that aren't there yet, because that's where the potential for damage is a lot greater.
Laura, you're going to be releasing a new product soon, and you mentioned the agentic piece as far as building it. Like, how different is the team that built this versus the team that might have built prior apps?
Well, this is a very large vendor in software development that we've been working with for a very long time. So they came to us and said, we'd like to, embark on leveraging AI for software development.
Yeah.
So they've helped us stand up agents to take requirements and turn them into user stories and do the dev work. Now there are agents that are actually reviewing. There are agents that are fixing defects. So I don't think there would have been a world in which we would have worked with a smaller startup to redesign our entire mobile app with.
And how are you that regulatory compliance piece that Alex brought up is like so important. Like how are you sort of, do you need to double, triple, like insulate against
that's
that?
yeah, what I mentioned earlier is we have like a whole AI governance board, and that is putting like legal SOWs in place, legal agreements, to ensure that they're held liable for anything that happens, because we're giving them access to obviously all of our system of records, all of our code base. Like that could in turn, impact our customers. So I don't think we would have done that with any smaller company. And so when we think about like vendors and bringing on new vendors to help us solve any single problem, there's like any other bank, there's, you have to have insurance, you have to go through SOC 2 compliance. Like it can take 6 months to 2 years to become a vendor with a big FI. So the sales cycle is extremely long. Some vendors don't ever survive the sales cycle, let alone to become a viable vendor.
Yeah, they might be gone by the time the sales cycle's over.
Correct.
John, how are you sort of managing that risk of in terms of working with vendors?
Yeah, I mean, Laura brought up, it's always easier to start from a position of trust. And so those who have a track record, the vendors that you're already working with, that have expertise not only with what you're asking them to do, but also expertise with us as a bank and how we function, what like our strengths, our weaknesses. But like I said, I really do think one of our big components when we're doing, especially new vendors and onboarding them, is do they have a team that can think through those problems? Because we have a vendor, Vault, and they help us with our compliance, and they're super great. But we have to work a lot, right? Like we're road mapping still and like on the fly, because there's a lot of hiccups that hit compliance versus marketing versus our CRE team, and so everyone has their different use cases. And and that's kind of the unique thing about AI is it's such a transformative technology, but it doesn't have like a very specific use case that's defined across the board, right? And so because of that, because the opportunities are so large, we're all trying to backdoor our way into those use cases. And when you're trying to do that, just like when we're trying to build out our marketing team at Tab, it's who are the people that we're going to bring along the way to help us, through this journey and help us overcome the hurdles that we just know that we're going to run into.
If I may, I think, you were just saying, like, we don't know what we don't know, and, but what are complex decisions except for a series of small, repeatable tasks, right? And so we're at a space right now where we're all looking at our teams saying, this time next year, a certain percentage of your tasks need to be powered by AI. And this time next year, we'll be saying the same thing, and those tasks are going to be more complex. And so the speed of that and hiring and leading a team with that kind of mentality, that's the winning team, in my opinion, because we all need to be humble and know that there's so much we still don't know, but we do know what brought us here. We do know the fundamentals, and so you can start with automating as much of those as possible that you can feel comfortable with.
And I like that. And one thing that comes to mind is that I remember back in the early days of the internet, and I'm gonna seem old at this point, but we used to talk about, oh, it's like a catalog, but it's not. It wasn't. It would start off like a catalog, but look at the internet, it hardly is anything like a catalog. Can you think of any when we're looking at LLMs, for example, and we're obviously using analogies of what we know, like do you think that like that's going to break or like go in an interesting manner?
So when you're referencing catalog, so the way I think about it is like from an a marketing perspective, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we're rethinking about from an acquisition perspective the type of content and the structure of the content. It needs to be able to be parsed and extracted by the agent, right? So it's I would think of it less around the catalog and more as like, the structure of the data itself. I don't know what you have to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other side of it is that the tools that the consumers are using are going to continue to evolve, right? So today they're accessing it mostly through chatbots. ChatGPT has 800 million users. Most of them are free users. Pretty soon they're going to monetize those free users by putting ads in it. Then we're going to go from the SEO equivalent that we're dealing with today to the SEM equivalent that we got good at playing before. So that evolution is going to be very similar. I think what's different potentially is that if I, the consumer, have this like superpowered generalized intelligence that won't sleep, how does that change my consumption habits or my shopping habits? And I think that's a really important question to answer, because a lot of business models in financial services are built on laziness or inertia or a lack of information or a lack of transparency or just a level of complexity, right? Think about the number of purchase decisions you make on a daily basis where you're reading the product details and the terms and conditions and you're like, I don't really know what that means, but other people like it, so I guess I'll pick it. Like, that's a bad way to make a decision, and you're oftentimes probably making a suboptimal decision for what you're trying to achieve. Once consumers are more empowered with these tools, that I think will put pressure, a good type of pressure, on institutions to up-level their game, right? And it was said earlier that even if you're like a very small bank, you can outkick your coverage if you have a great product that is going to rise to the top when consumers are more empowered. And I think that in some ways is a more meaningful difference and something that's hard to draw a parallel to previous eras.
Yeah, I completely agree. Speaking to the point of structured content, on the prior panel, there was a conversation about how much you think about data. I think about structured content a lot, right? The ability to understand how you kind of create those matrices of the information that you're creating that is compliant, that is high quality. That's going to be the bedrock of personalization. And so, like, how it's going to change consumers. Right now, you're seeing a lot of long tail questions that are like, here is the person that I am. Here is the problem I am seeking to solve. Tell me what I don't know. All right, LLM tells you all the things, right?
You never could have put that in a keyword search before.
No.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, in order to meet that intent, for me, in the content space, I need to think about, all right, so how much content do I actually need to create? What personas are important to me in my business? How do I match them with products that meet their intent, that are great for them? How was on the stage before speaking about Engine by Gen and how we have a ton of up-to-date information about financial products. You marry that with persona-based content creation, like, that's the future. And so, like, I think that you're going to see a lot of long tail, and I think that it'll be interesting. I said before that volume of query in these LLM-based searches, it's still pretty low. But I ultimately think, given what this technology is going to be able to create in terms of personalization, it will surpass what was traditional search, because people are going to have more questions, and this is where they're going to go to ask them.
It comes down to the quality of the data, right?
Yeah.
It's garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yes.
So from a user perspective, they're getting smarter in terms of the input of the information that they're providing to the agent itself, right? And then on the FI side, right, it comes down to how we're restructuring our content and the type of content we're providing to make sure that we are now, coming out when customer inputs that information, it's feeding back, like, this is the right FI, this is the right product for you. So there's two sides to that equation.
And then I would add on, we're talking about all of the benefits of AI, efficiency gains and the growth. But one thing that we're seeing, Harvard, the Harvard Business Review just came out and kind of utilized and went through, hey, how are people actually, now that we have all these efficiency gains from the AI, how are they utilizing it? And it turns out that we're just emailing and using Teams more, right? Like, we're not, like, this whole idea that we're going to upskill and up-level our teams into higher impactful jobs. It's just not turning out to be the case. Like, we're just communicating more, and we're not making that transition. So a lot of times we know, like in our careers, when we're going from an IC into a manager or a director role, like there's that chasm and that gap. But I really do think this is a training issue as well that we're going to have to pay attention to, because what's happening is, as we create a vacuum of time, that vacuum is just getting sucked up into more emails and communications, as opposed to thinking through like higher level stuff and higher level like orchestration and content. Like Sarah was kind of talking about, like, how do we manage this and how do we think through like larger impactful work, as opposed to just getting sucked up into busy work.
And I think we're sort of winding down in terms of time. If I can ask for final thoughts, maybe Laura, why don't we start with you?
So I guess final thoughts, given our panel, is about acquisition and engagement. I think we're just embarking on this journey, right? There is a huge opportunity for financial institutions, banks of all sizes, to really leverage AI to capitalize on everything from acquisition, engagement, and retention.
Yeah, building on that, I think one thing we didn't spend a ton of time talking about on this panel, but is really important, is engagement and retention. A lot of energy and budget and activity goes towards acquisition, because acquisition sort of is a sugar high and makes us feel good. Retention is like how you build a good, durable business over time, and how do you deepen your relationships with customers. We have a lot of like dormant customers that aren't really doing much beyond the original job they hired us to do, and I think AI can potentially unlock some of that.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, a little bit similar idea is this idea of, I really do think this is where, when you have a lot of performative things and channels that start to become commoditized, brand really shows up. And how does that brand show up? It's how do we utilize that data to show up for our customers? And the fact of the matter is, we really haven't, we've taken an advantage or taken for granted that we have trust with our customers, and just say, hey, yeah, they trust us, that's why they bank with us. When in reality, there's a stickiness factor, there's inertia, there's habits, and all of those things are going to be upended. And so I really do think that this is an opportunity for banks to think and lean into the branding side of, like, how do we add value to the marketplace and to our customers, and how do we show up, and how do we utilize that data? And we can use AI in a lot of different ways, but how do we use that information to really, give value to our customers and show up for them?
Yeah. For me, I mean, well said. I just want to add on, it's just building trust. The real winners are building trust, not just in efficiency, but building trust with your clientele. And I feel that's where the real winners are going to be.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, last thing I'll add is a little bit different, but if I were to give one piece of advice here, as a marketer, don't underestimate the role of your content management system, your CMS, in your ability to actually deliver the personalization that we've all been talking about here. And also encourage your content developers, the mighty team that you still choose to employ if you do, to understand how that technology works.
Well, I think we've just scratched the surface, and I feel like I could talk with you all for hours more. And I want to thank you for coming out here and spending some time talking with us today. Thank you.